kind of just too cute by half. We'd say it and then we'd just do a radio show. But 2026, things are literal. If you're going to take it constitutional, you better take it constitutional. So today, we're going to talk about words. Words are important. People tell you there are bad words, but they're not really bad words. There's bad thoughts, there's bad intentions, and words. Apologies to George Carlin for that. So President Trump gets in Trump's trouble sometimes because people will only report on some of his words, like very fine people. And people will then react to the words, and then the reactions to the words become the news cycle. The president was asked about a story we reported on the radio show, which was somewhat of a tone-deaf moment, where last week both ExxonMobil and Chevron, 2 out of the 3 parts of Standard Oil, I will remind people, Trump's a big Teddy Roosevelt guy too. So the quarterly report was going on, the conference call was going on, and I think it was the Chevron CEO gleefully reported that they were able to increase their margins by 12% over the year before because they were able to push up the price of a gallon of gasoline because of the war. Really? Did you think that through before you said it? And did you not think somebody was going to send that information to somebody in the press? I mean, you might trust everyone on your board, but even President Trump and his second administration has people leaking stuff to the press. So President Trump was asked about it yesterday, and he laid into them. He said he thought that they should be giving that money back to the customers, and that he would like to see them in some way, shape, or form punished about this kind of gouging. And the left, in a bad spot, because the left loves to go on about price gouging until President Trump brings it up. Now, what are we supposed to do? So they're in this conundrum. They don't know how to react to it because President Trump just stole one of their issues. Conservatives are all up in arms saying, he has no right. It's a free market capitalism. And well, free market capitalism wouldn't leave you with like 2 or 3 choices of oil and gasoline manufacturers. But we'll come back to that. President Trump is not a Heritage Foundation conservative. He has probably never read Russell Kirk. If he's ever met Russell Kirk, it was because he was some 20-year-old at a Ronald Reagan event. So we ascribe conservatism to Donald Trump because he's a Republican who likes capitalism. And so therefore, he has all the trappings of people we like to call conservatives. But he's not. He is ultimately the most populist we're going to ever get. And he reacts to things not ideologically, but politically. He's trying to win some midterm elections. And the last thing he needs is for an indelicate admission by the oil companies that they've been jacking up the price because they were able to sell to the American media that the price of gas was high because of the war. redoubly, the fact that they were doing that doesn't make Donald Trump happy with them, because that means they knew they were doing it and they knew that it was making Donald Trump look bad. But they can, because it's their company. See, capitalism, or better put, the free market, would put you in a place where you could say, the hell with ExxonMobil, the hell with Chevron, I'll buy my gas from insert someone else. And there are someone's else. But at the end of the day, how much of America's oil, or actually how much of America's gasoline, comes from ExxonMobil and Chevron is pretty stunning. I think you have Lukoil, which are the Russians, BP, who's actually the other quarter of Standard Oil, Amoco, that you don't have a lot of options when it comes to gasoline. Even fewer so when it comes to diesel fuel. So it's not like some guy can say, hey, I don't know why the gas stations are all charging $4.50 for a gallon of gas. My company isn't paying nearly that much for it, so I'm going to only charge $3 or whatever. This is what happens when you get with these collusive organizations like OPEC. You wind up with marketplaces that nobody quite gets because they're commodities, and commodities markets are based on how much is it going to cost me to replace this. And the retailers are in no position because they're the ones who have to replace that gallon of gasoline. So if ExxonMobil and Chevron are saying it's $4.50 a gallon, well, that's what the Sheetz or the Wawa is going to wind up charging you. And that's where people start to misunderstand. Just because not everything is a Sheetz or a Wawa, or not everything is an ExxonMobil or a Chevron station, they think, well, what about Sheetz? Sheetz doesn't make their own gasoline. They buy it. And the people who buy it, they buy it from ExxonMobil and Chevron. So you get these companies, and when you only have two companies doing the whole thing, that's not a free market. Aside from that, when they start to behave collusively because they're in a commodities market, I think there was a documentary starring Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd about that once. And there's one you'd see rebooted. Trading Places too, at their age. So now, what's the pushback? How does President Trump go after these companies while you've got conservatives saying, you can't do that, that's the free market? And it's not the free market. But because it's the opposite of what the left wants, you're sort of handing the narrative over to the left. So brilliantly, Donald Trump picks up talking points from the left, and now the left doesn't know what to do with it. Hopefully it drives the price of gas back down. About all you really have is shareholder activism, because you can't beat them at the price pump because you need to buy the gasoline, and if that's what they're selling the gasoline for, you're going to buy it. So you can maybe do some shareholder activism, but I don't think anyone owns that many shares of Chevron or ExxonMobil to really drive some shareholder activism. Do you? I don't. It's going to take President Trump and the court of public opinion, and it's going to take some of the third-party retailers to say, I'm not paying that. because we've now seen that when given a chance, immorality in capitalism or the free market, the marketplace, is just as bad as immorality in government. We've talked about this in the past on the morning show, that in order for the United States Constitution to be an effective form of government, we need to be a moral people in order for capitalism to work. You need to be a moral people. You can't be just screw the other guy and pass the savings along to my friends. You really have to, pardon me, do what's right rather than do what's the most profitable. And I understand there are Supreme Court precedents on this. The Supreme Court has ruled in cases in the past that the only consideration the board of a publicly traded company can take is what's best for the shareholder. So when you say to yourself, how come these corporations don't consider their customers? Well, because the Supreme Court told them they weren't supposed to. And this is because years ago, a corporation cut its prices for its customers, and a bunch of the shareholders sued it because they said, hold it, you're supposed to be taking care of us. And the Supreme Court sided with them, said, yeah, you know what? Corporation can only really consider their shareholders. So maybe we need a new Supreme Court ruling on that. Maybe we need to go back to the early 90s and see some of the different ways the Clinton administration was able to play games with the stock market, because that happened too. But there needs to be a fix to it. And President Trump called it out, and he's not wrong. But we don't have a free market capital system where all the consumers can stop buying Exxon's gas and it's going to hurt them, because half the time you don't even know when you're buying Exxon's gas. So consider that as part of the truisms, just like when President Trump said there were very fine people on both sides of the street in Charlottesville, that he's not wrong. And we need better morality in our corporate governance. But when the law is clear and these CEOs could find themselves ousted from their offices if they don't consider the shareholder first, where are you? So you need new action. So now the second part of our walk, I said we're going to talk about words today, is socialism. Still much being made. It's primary day here in the Commonwealth of Virginia and in Michigan and Kansas. The Michigan Senate race, you've got a traditional Democrat up against a Democratic Socialist. Here in Virginia's 5th Congressional District, you have a Democrat up against a Libertarian who just hates Trump. But the Democrat, who everyone says is going to win, met with the Democratic Socialists, we told you this story yesterday, and wanted to avoid at all costs being seen with the Democratic Socialists. And here's the question. So for 20 years or so, Democrats have governed to socialism. See Obamacare, for example. And they wouldn't call themselves socialists. Now they're calling themselves socialists. What does that mean they are now? And take a moment to consider that where they haven't had a free market since 1958, Cuba is talking about trying to open up their marketplace, create capitalism. And Vietnam, another communist country that I believe we lost a lot of our young men in battle against, is reforming their economy to become more capitalist, more free market. The whole battle over Taiwan is a free, open market versus communist control. Why would we, the country that has, after a great deal of patience, inspired Cuba, Vietnam, some of these other places to drop the communist idea, why would we be running back towards it? That's another head scratcher. And I think it's because we really went Marxist, softcore Marxist, in 1964 with the Great Society. That's when the social programs and the nanny state really began. And little by little, rather than get rid of it like we should have done in 1971 when it was becoming patently obvious that it was bankrupting the country, no, we just said, let's get off the gold standard so we can print more money. And here we are. Luckily, we're still the reserve currency. And we survived the attempt at this brick bank, Russia, Iran, and China, South Africa, to try to undo the reserve currency status of the US government. Well, when's the next one coming? When does the next battle over who's the reserve currency of the planet? Years ago, there was a book written, it was really about Japan and the United States, but it said very clearly that the next world war would be fought with dollars and currencies and not bombs and bullets. And we still have some bombs and bullets flying around, but I think that's what you're seeing now is a world war over currency. And we could still lead the way. We still have an economy that would be exceptional if we would get off of its back and allow people to start being a free market again.